out to my daughter, tried to reach out to my son. He was very angry. He wouldn't accept my phone calls, but my daughter was a little more forgiving, and she would take my phone calls, and you know, she would even let me see the kids, her kids a couple times. And I would say things like, have you talked to your brother? Have you told your brother how good I'm doing? And she said, Mom, he doesn't believe it. He doesn't believe it. And I just said, okay, that's fine, okay. But at the end of my 18 months, now I told you I've been married and divorced 5 times. But at this point in my life, I had been married 4, and I'd been married 5 times, divorced 4 times. So I still had my future ex-husband. And he said, Dad, come back to Middletown. You're not getting high. We can make it work. I know we can do this. So I said, okay. So I moved back to Middletown, and I think I lived with him for about a week. And I called my daughter, and I said, if I don't move out, I'm either going to kill him or I'm going to get high. And my daughter said, please don't get high, Mom. They'd rather see me go to jail or murder than get high. Okay. So anyways, my daughter and I went out, and we found this little ghetto apartment in Middletown, and I loved it. It was mine. And, you know, I was doing the deal. I was going to meetings. I had a sponsor. I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. And I was talking to my daughter as much as I possibly could. And, you know, I was still saying, have you talked to your brother? Have you told him how good I'm doing? No, Mom. I mean, I told him, but he said, just says good for you. So, said, okay. So I'm at a meeting one night at Traditions Clubhouse, and every time anybody new comes into a meeting, everybody turns around, and we always tried to pick what we thought their drug was, and, you know, create a backstory for it, so to speak. So one of my friends said, that's a tall, good-looking drink of water, and I turned around and I said, that's not a drink of water, that's my baby. So it was JD, and I said, what are you doing here? And now, I did have periods of sobriety where I took the kids to meetings, and they loved meetings. That both my kids loved 12-step meetings. And JD said, well, I hadn't taken in a meeting in a long time, and we kind of chuckled. And he said, after the meeting, I got to talk to you about something important. I said, okay. So we enjoyed the meeting, and then afterwards, we went out and sat in the car, and he said, Mom, I wrote a book. And you're not very favorable in the book, but I got to be honest with you. I thought you'd be dead. But Lindsay tells me that you're doing real good. And if you don't want me to have that book published, I won't. And I said, no. My exact words were, publish the effing book, but I'm in church. I'm in a church crowd, so I'll say effing. Thank you. That's gross. So anyways, the book got published, and I don't know if you've read Hillbilly Elegy, but there's a line in the book. There's a line in the book that says, my mother, a woman I wished I'd never met. It's heartbreaking. Heartbreaking. But I did ask him, will the book help you heal? And he said, I think it will. And that's when I said, publish the effing book. So anyways, the book gets published, and I'm at work, and I get a call from my daughter, and she says, JD's book just made it to the bestseller list, and he's flying all of us out to New York for a big party. And I said, is he flying me? No, Mom, he doesn't want you there. And for the first time, I thought, why am I doing all this? Why am I doing all this if I'm not going to have my kids back the way I want them? But I called my sponsor, and my sponsor said, this may be as good as it gets. Are you going to throw away all your hard work to go to a party in New York where you know there's going to be drinking and you don't even drink anyways? And I said, no, I'm not. But that was hard. That crushed me. So You know, I'm still going on now. I'm no longer a registered nurse for the state of Ohio. I have lost my license. I'm also at a meeting, and a girl who is a nurse who is getting high, and I tell her, you will mess up your whole life. You think they don't know, but they do, and you shouldn't be taking care of people inebriated. You know, and it's like, I thought, wow, how grown up of me. And she said, oh, you're so great, why aren't you a nurse? And I said, I don't know, but I'm gonna call them. So I called them, and they agreed to meet with me. And they said, now I think I was working at a gas station, and I was living in my ghetto apartment, and they said, what we'll do is we're gonna put you on a 1-year legitimate suspension. But during that year, you have to submit to urine drug screens at your cost. You have to take continuing education units for every year you haven't been a nurse at your cost. So they're like, all I could hear was at your cost, at your cost. So finally I asked, about how much is this gonna cost me? And they said, you should probably have about $6,000. And if at any time you have to stop because you don't have the money, you will be disqualified from the alternative program for addicted nurses. Well, I didn't have any money, so I thought, this is never gonna happen, but God, this is a God shot. I get home, I get a phone call from my son, and he said, Mom, Ron Howard wants to turn the book into a movie and you're gonna get paid. That's another God shot. Okay. Well, now hold your applause for this, please. Because I then get a call from Ron Howard, and Ron Howard says, Beverly, we're gonna pay you $12,000. And I said, you're gonna pay me $12,000 to tell the whole world I'm a drug addict whore? I don't think so. So then I get a call from my son who says, Mom, please tell me you didn't just hang up on Ron Howard. And I said, do you know what they wanted to pay me? And he said, no. And I told him, and he said, my drug addict mom would have taken that money and ran. My recovery mom fights for what she knows is right. At the time, his wife was pregnant, and he said, when Usha goes into labor, do you want to come up and watch your grandson be born? They were living in Columbus, and I said, of course I do. So a couple months later, he calls and he says, Usha's in labor, come on up. So I drive to Columbus. My daughter's up there. Usha's parents are there. I mean, we're all there. And JD comes out and he says, well, he's not coming tonight. So everybody go get a motel room and I'll call you if it happens. And I was gathering up my stuff. I was going to go get a motel room. And he said, not you, Mom. Will you go to the house and make sure it's straightened so Usha and the baby come home to a clean house? Will you let the dogs out? That's what you ask your mom to do. And I had never even been to that. And I said, of course I will. So I didn't get any sleep. I cleaned that house top to bottom, walked the dogs, fed the dogs, and I'm crying all night, oh my God, this is what you ask your mom to do. He asked me and I'm his mom, and this is, and it was amazing. And the next morning now, this is another God shot, and I don't know, this is what I think. But JD's first son, Beverly Vance, was born, and my fourth grandchild, and he said, Mom, do you want to hold your grandson? Now, I don't know if this happened, but this is what happened in my mind. He looked at that baby and knew that no matter what, he would do anything for that little boy for the rest of his life. And then he looked at me and he realized that no matter what, I would do anything for him. I just had a disease. I had the disease of addiction. And I don't know, but after that moment, it's like he started calling. We like, you know, and then, you know, we got this, there was this big joke, like I was gonna get millions from the movie. I did not, let me just point that out. But JD said, Mom, what are you gonna do with all your movie money? And I said, I'm gonna buy a house. Ooh, that's such a great idea. You're thinking fiscally, and I don't know how lawyers talk, but that's what it sounded like to me. And him and my daughter became obsessed with finding me a place to live. And I found this little place. It was a little ranch on an acre of land, and I told them about it, and they go, oh, Mom, you're not getting any younger. Who's going to cut your grass? And all this, and it's like, you need a condo. It's like, I don't want a condo. A condo's like an apartment. Exactly. And so my daughter calls me about a week later and says, Mom, I found this condo. You gotta come look at it. And it's like, oh my God, okay. And it had one of those realtor locks on it, and she knew the code, and I said, if the police get called, you're going to jail, girl, because I'm completely legal today. And we were walking around, and the condo was beautiful. It really was beautiful. And I'm like, oh, if I had it, well, she started it. She was like, where would you put your couch? Where would you do this? Where would you? And I'm playing along, you know, with her. Then there was a knock on the door, and I made a joke, and I said, that's the cops. You're going down, girl. I'm selling you out. We opened the door, and it was JD. And JD looked at Lindsay, and Lindsay looked at JD, and Lindsay said she loves it. And he held up the keys, and he said, I bought it for you. I went for about 4 years and didn't speak to him, to now he's telling me to save my money, and he bought me a condo that I still live in today. So I'm a little lonely, and I'm thinking, you know, I've been single a long time, and I tell my kids, I think I'm going to get on one of those dating apps. And they're like, oh, Mom, no, get a dog, get a dog. So I got a dog. So my daughter and I went to this rescue in Kentucky, and you know, I seen all the dogs were lovely. I would have taken any one of them home. But I looked through this glass door. It was about this big, and they had this old dog in there, and she was pretty rough looking. And I said, what's wrong with that dog? And they said, well, she's scheduled to be euthanized. And I said, can I pet her? And they said, yeah, but you'll have to sign something saying if she bites you, you won't hold us responsible. And that's the dog I adopted. We bonded instantly. She's my girl. I'm an old lady. She was an old lady. And I was just telling Justin today, she can no longer climb up into the bed. So now I sleep on my living room floor. Because we've slept together for the last 5 years. We're not stopping now. So, you know, I did my year's suspension with the nursing board, and I knew that when I went back to work, I wanted to work in substance use. I wanted to work with people like me. And so I got a job at a substance use facility, and I had a few restrictions on my license, but I met with the Ohio Board of Nursing, and I said, look, I will do anything you want, but I want my license free and clear. And as of July 24, 2025, I have my Ohio Board of, well, I have a compact license now. I told you I get kind of off track if I don't use my cards, but so let's see here. December 29, 2025. I don't know if we have any medical people in the audience, okay? But I had what's known as a Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. It is a heart attack, but it's not a heart attack due to blockage. It's a heart attack due to, I had a hiatal hernia that had penetrated my diaphragm, which is this muscle right here, and was sitting on my heart, and basically caused cardiac damage. This is December 29th. I had an inauguration to get to on January 20th. And I told the doctors, I don't care if you release me or not, I'm gonna be on that plane. I'm going to Washington, D.C. So they did release me to fly January 13th, but I'm in Washington, D.C., and I'm still not feeling 100%. But I get a call from one of JD's staffers, you have to be up at such and such a time, you're gonna be in the motorcade. And I said, why? And they said, JD wants you on stage. And I said, are you sure? He wants me. And she said, does he call anybody else mom? And I went, and she said, no, he was very specific. He wants Usha, the 3 kids, and mom to form a semicircle around him. And I was there, and I don't know if you guys saw all the social media about the poor woman in the red sweater, and everybody else was dressed by designers. I was dressed by Kohl's of Middletown. And I had house shoes on because my feet and ankles were still so swollen up that I couldn't even get shoes on my feet at the time. But I tell my daughter, Lindsay, so a couple years ago I get a call from my daughter, and she says, Mom, Kevin and I are having some issues, can I move in? That's what you ask your mom. You ask your mom if you can stay with your mom. I said, heck yeah. Then she said, can I bring my dog? And I said, well, I don't know if your dog will get along with my dog. And then she started crying, and I said, bring the dog, bring the dog. So anyways, they have since reconciled, and she's out of my house. And I love my son-in-law very much. He's the one that took me to the hospital when I was so sick. And I tell my daughter, I said, you know, when I speak to people, I end my story with, oh, I'm so blessed and life is so good. And I said, I don't like that ending. And my daughter said, Mom, you're just getting started. Yeah. So my name is Beverly Vance, and I'm just getting started.